everyone. Thank you for joining us on the God is Great podcast. Tonight we have an amazing guest by the name of Callie Estes out of the great state of Texas, who has a phenomenal story to tell and just a lot of overcoming. And she's such a beautiful human being. I hope her story blesses you tonight. Hi, Callie.
Hi,
How are you doing tonight?
good.
Good. All right. So, a couple things about Callie is she was born um, to a mom who used all kinds of drugs. So she was born on drugs and had to go through quite a ordeal overcoming that, and ended up getting adopted and a great family. And then, as life progressed, different things had occurred, and has now started her own business. And so, Callie, why don't you kind of introduce yourself and give us a little bit about your first weeks and months of life and kind of what that looked like, your where you were born. That's a crazy story about, you know, where you were born and just a few minutes from the border. And
hmm
why don't you go ahead and share all that with us?
Okay, so when I was inside the womb, my birth mom used a bunch of drugs. She was actually making meth in the bathtub where she was pregnant with me. And at the time, I have a lot of biological siblings. I have 13 biological siblings, but I believe that three of them were already born. The oldest one was probably five. And so they got to watch it all go down, but um, by that time, their my birth mom just didn't want them anymore. So that she went to the babysitter's house and just dropped them off there.
Mm.
And because CPS was threatening them, they just didn't want to chance it. And so, um, and so they came up with a plan. They were like, well, since, we're gonna have Callie, we don't want her to get taken away by CPS. Um, so when I was born, they didn't know when I was gonna be born because drug addicts don't seem to like go to doctor's appointments and stuff for their
Yeah.
babies, and because it just flies over their heads. So they didn't know if I was a girl, and they didn't know when I was going to be born. Well, I was born in the middle of January, and so in Washington, sometimes it can get super snowy and icy. And my birth dad was driving, and his car slipped on some ice, and they were, when she figured out she was in labor. She's like, we should probably like get out of Washington and try to go to Oregon, and so CPS can't take her away. And so as they were driving to Oregon, um, the car had slipped on some ice, and my birth dad he took his hands off the steering wheel. That's when he realized that she was crowning, and he just took his hands off, and the car corrected itself. And they were 5 minutes away from the Oregon border, and then I was born.
So you were born
So,
in a car, 5 minutes from the Oregon border, but still in the state of Washington. So CPS still had jurisdiction.
CPS did. And so, since I was born in the car, obviously they had to call 911. So, that was a huge life saving moment. But they brought me to
Yeah.
the hospital. Then they found out that I was a girl, but I was not able to be held or anything like that by my birth mom because she was on drugs. And that's when they ran more tests, found a lot more drugs in my system, drugs that they didn't even know existed.
Oh, wow.
And then they put me in the process of being adopted. I had to go into a foster home, but it was for drug babies, so it was more of like a rehab. And in the process of that, my body really wanted to relapse because it was craving those drugs. And so I had stopped breathing, and my foster mom had saved my life. And eventually the drugs got out of my system, but when those drugs get out of the system, when you're so little, your body can still crave it and
Yeah.
want to relapse on it. And so those first few months of finally being adopted and into my adoptive home, it was rough because I was crying all the time. I didn't want to sleep. My body was constantly shaking. Um, I wasn't eating. I didn't want to do anything. And then when I turned one, or when I started getting hair, I started pulling out my hair, just trying to cope with those feelings. I started just hitting my head on things. And for some reason, like, I knew the love I had and have for my parents. And I think it was just a normal response for my body to be like, I don't want anything to do with my parents, even though I was so little. So I had to go to counseling to really bond with my adoptive mom.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
made me like hold the baby doll and close my eyes and pretend I was the baby. And it really helped
Yeah.
a lot.
Definitely. Yeah. Now, with being adopted, you also had two older siblings that were also adopted, not
Mm-hmm.
not biological siblings, but other siblings. And then you did
Yeah.
have one of your biological siblings, your younger brother was adopted with you as well. So four of you, all adopted, but two of you fully biologically related.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a lot.
Mm-hmm. It was a lot.
Yeah,
It was really fun to grow up and learn their stories, but also like they didn't talk about it much, and we all are pretty close, so it was really fun to grow up with each
yeah,
other.
yeah, it was. And because of your adopted parents, that's how we met. And
Mm-hmm.
your parents were our pastors in
Mm-hmm.
Washington. And so we got to meet, and then you became like best friends with my youngest daughter for several
Mm-hmm.
years. And I remember you guys running around the church, roller skating, and all even through the church when no one was there,
Yeah.
and riding bikes all over town. It was great. And yeah, and you and I ended up becoming close, and I became
Mm-hmm.
kind of mommy number two, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I of course know a lot about you, which is why I think your story is so phenomenal. You've overcome a lot. Um, and then let's see. So your parents were pastors. So what was it like growing up, for one, adopted, and two, as a pastor's kid?
Yeah. Everything happens for a reason and everything fell into place. I'm glad that I was adopted by a good family, but not only like a good family, but they were so involved in the church. And I think I really needed that. Um, it was really nice. I loved being around people. I loved going to church every Sunday, and I loved going to like missionettes every Wednesday. That was always fun.
Yeah,
The church was definitely like a second family to me. So
for sure,
it's
for
always
sure.
fun to be around.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then after we moved away, you guys ended up moving and relocating to Texas. And that was the
Yeah.
first move of your life.
Hmm.
How was that?
It was a big change. I left everything that I've known. I left the church. I left like all my childhood friends. It was hard, but my dad got called to Texas and we followed. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because he had a brother who had cancer.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
He had
And
a
so
brother who had cancer and then passed away, and his youngest son was my age, and he has a lot of kids. And we decided we should move to Texas to support them, and all of our family lived here anyways. And it turns out they did not stay in one place. They kind of just stayed where they were from, which is about a 4 hour drive from us. So we were like, what do we do now? And then my mom just had a vision of this big, huge, like farmhouse, and they transferred into a coffee shop. But my dad felt something deep in his heart that his pastoring wasn't over. And if we got called to Texas, then there must just be a huge spiritual movement in that. And so they opened up a church inside of the coffee shop as well.
yeah, which is pretty cool. And that is the
Yeah,
cutest coffee shop. I love the farmhouse. So if anyone's ever in
it's
Texas,
so
go
cool.
visit the farmhouse Coffee and Treasures. up in
Mhm.
Argyle. I think it's in Argyle, right?
Yeah, it's in
Yeah.
Argyle. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Little tiny town. It's the cutest little coffee shop. Um,
Yeah.
and then with moving, and I've come visited you there, and I'll be back. Um, but with moving, you also ended up moving to a high school there, and then you ended up becoming a teen mom while you were still in high school. But you did end
Mhm.
up graduating, and you graduated early. So go ahead and tell us what that was about.
Yeah, so when I moved from Washington, I started another school and I wasn't really used to Texas schools at all. So I did not like it. So my parents were like, let's switch her to a different school. So got switched to a different school. And I stayed there for a little bit. I don't know how long. And then my dad had a vision of a girl crying out to him, and and he got called to the town we live in now. And so I switched schools again, and that's when I met Preston.
Yep.
hmm And
Yep.
me and this girl, we became very close throughout the summer because she showed me around the school. I had to follow her schedule to get used to the school, and we just clicked right away. And one night, it was like the Holy Spirit came out of her, and I figured out that her mom was the one that was crying out to God that my dad had a vision about.
Oh, wow.
And I met Preston through her. So, yeah, it all kind of just came into place. So,
It
I had my
did.
daughter when I was 17, and a month later, I turned 18. I was able to graduate high school a year early so I could focus on her and everything. But I had a really good support system, so that was really nice.
You did. You did. You definitely
Yeah.
had some great support behind you on that one.
hmm
Even though it was like your mom had recommended, maybe putting her up for adoption or whatever, but
hmm
you stood on principle. You're like, I can do this.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not like my birth parents. So I was like, I've got no reason to.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, and I'm glad that you did keep her. She's a cutie.
mm,
And then you ended
she's,
up getting married to
mm,
her dad, to Preston. And then you had one more baby.
I did.
Yep.
hmm
And he is adorable. So you got one boy, one
Yeah.
girl. And
hmm
then now after all of that, you started your own photography business.
I did. Yeah.
How is that going?
That it's been going really good. It's just always something that I've been interested in, and one day I was like, I should just get a camera, and I did, and I took off with it. But I was struggling with postpartum depression, and I just really prayed for community.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's given me a lot of community. I've met a lot of cool people through it, and I've blessed a lot of people through that too.
You have, and your photos are amazing. And Callie does a lot of like weddings, graduations, prom, you name it,
Yeah.
but mostly just people. Like whatever events are happening, she photographs people, and she's really good at it.
Thank
And
you.
you're welcome. Now, to touch on this, and this is kind of the vulnerable part of it, is you
Mm,
and I have had a lot of midnight conversations dealing with anxiety and fear and overcoming stuff. I have seen you go from a very unsure, anxious driven, terrified young lady
yeah.
to this very strong woman of God. And it's a lot of conversations. And I know not just with me, but I've been blessed to be a
Mm,
part of it. And I think that that's huge. And out of all of the things that you've been through and the things that we've talked about, what's probably the biggest thing that stands out for you as far as your walk with Christ and going through all that and learning to lean in and what that looks like for you?
yeah. It was really tough for a long time because I didn't know how to cope with it. I
Yeah.
did not. It was really hard. And I mean, I was having panic attacks to where, I mean, like a long time ago, back when I lived in Washington, I still struggled with anxiety. And there was one time where we almost called 911 because it was that bad.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's horrible, but I don't know. I kind of just, as I got older, I think in my own experiences, I've learned to really lean on God with it.
You really
Because for
have.
the longest, yeah, because for the longest time when I was having anxiety, like my mind would just blank and I would just pray, like, open up my mind when I feel those things. Because I want to be aware, not only in myself, but like in the Holy Spirit. So I was just like, open myself to you because I trust you. And so I kept praying that. And every time I felt anxious, I would talk to you and you would
Mhm.
tell me to put on worship music. And so I would. And and it would always be the first worship song that would come on would always be about like trusting God and just overcoming those things. And so it really helped me a lot.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that it did, and I'm honored to be a part of that journey with you. And you know, yeah, I some days I think I talked to you more than I talked to my own kids, which was so cool. I
I
was
know.
like, yeah, it was awesome. And I don't mind at all. I think it's been great.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I get along really well. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, now, is there any specific thing that you want the audience to know about your walk with God? Or, because obviously growing up in your life, you weren't born into a Christian home, but you were brought into one. And
Yeah.
obviously, growing up as a pastor's kid, it's kind of right there in front of you. And not everybody has
Mm-hmm.
that. But is there any moment that you were just like, okay, this does make sense, and this is my relationship with Christ?
Yeah. When it all made sense was I really had time to look back on like what God has done in my life. Um, my favorite verse is perhaps this is a moment for which you were created. And that's always just stuck out to me for some reason. And so I always go back to the beginning of just the beginning of everything. And I take it step by step. And I'm just like, okay, God did this, but this was supposed to happen. And then I was like, God did this, but this was supposed to happen and it didn't. And it's made me realize that I've had such an attack on my life, but I've only had an attack on my life because Satan knows that I am so powerful.
Yep.
Um, so that helps a lot. That's been one reason where I'm like, okay, like maybe God can use me for something. And like when people say, oh wow, you've had such a hard life, I'm like, no, I haven't. I'm like, that is my testimony. So I look at it as like that. And also like just like my visions of heaven that I have talked about with you before.
Yeah.
Um, just
You're
like
welcome to
sitting
share
in a
that.
room. Yeah. So my I've had a few, but the one that really stuck out to me was I don't remember. I think I was just struggling with feeling love or something. Like feeling loved, but also just like not I was thinking like why would all that stuff happen to me when I was like so little because I was like that's just horrible. But it was also in the middle of me processing like this was supposed to happen, but it didn't, and kind of just trusting God with everything. And so I did have this like dream or vision or something where I went up to heaven, and my mom really likes farm animals, and so there's like this big chicken coop, and it was full of chickens, but like the chickens were rainbow colored, and I was like, my mom loves chickens, and God kind of just giggled and he said, I know. And so, like, it really made me think, like, he knows what we love and he knows, like, what our heart, like, desires. And so he brought me into this room and, um, it was just this big room. And if you look, like, to your left, There was like this big, huge field and everything. I was really close to my grandma before she had passed away, and all my other visions I've had, I've always asked, like, I want to see my grandma, I want to see my grandma. And usually he lets me right away, but this time he was like, no, not yet. And so he put this big, huge book in front of me, and like I felt like I knew, like in my spirit, that it was my book of life. I just didn't really want to process that. And it was just like a lot. So I was like, he just looked into my eyes, and when I looked into his eyes, like he was not speaking with his voice at all. He was speaking with his eyes, and that love felt so deep, like it's so unexplainable. And I asked him, I was like, can I see the book? Because like I want to know some things, but at the same time, like I don't. And he just looked at me and he was like, not yet. And it made no sense to me why the book was there, but I think he wanted me to know that my life is in the palm of his hands. And
Absolutely.
also the way that he was looking at me and the way that he was making me feel, like that's the kind of love that he has on my life. So I don't have to worry about anything. And I asked him, I was like, can I go see my grandma now? And he was like, yes. And so I got to see my grandma, and just everybody was so happy. I got to see my friend who died in second grade from cancer. Um, and I got to see my grandpa, and he was working cars, which he used to work on airplanes and cars, like on Earth. But it's just something that he enjoys to do. So that was really cool to see that whatever
Yeah,
we think is enjoyable on Earth is what the Lord wants us to feel in heaven.
yeah.
Um, all the good things.
All the
But it really spoke to me because I was like, well, if I can feel that type of love from a father, I don't have
Mhm.
to worry about my past at all.
Yeah,
So that's when I really became like, I always knew that I knew the Lord, and I always knew that I loved him and that I followed him. That was the real time when I realized not only the Bible, but the love that I felt and that I could
absolutely.
trust him
That's so
with
good.
like my anxiety and my past. And like he even told me to reach out to my birth dad, and I have. And all I said was, I forgive you, because the Lord told me to tell him that I forgave him.
Yeah,
So I told him, and ever since I've reached out to him about that, he's been talking about God, and he'll just randomly text me saying that he's praying for me, and it's really cool to see how, like, just all that unfold. And he's apologized about the past and just everything that I was feeling and all the trauma that I remember from even being a baby, which I didn't know was possible, but it is. He apologized for all of it.
wow. That's
Yeah,
huge. Yeah,
yeah.
what a testimony.
hmm
That's so good.
So it's been amazing to watch all of that unfold.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you are truly a testimony of no matter what circumstances your life starts under, you can go on to do something great. And,
Yeah.
you have a beautiful family, you have a great business.
hmm
Yeah,
And it's just like another thing that helped me was again just seeing like everything that he's done, from Washington to being put into a family to finding community in the church to this was supposed to happen but it didn't because God saved my life. Zane tried to attack me. Then we moved to Texas, got into that church that my dad had planted, found community through the coffee shop. Not only that, but leading people to God through the coffee shop,
yeah,
to having a baby as a teen mom, which really shaped me and again showed me that the love that the Lord looks at us is the love that He wants us to look at Him. Like He wants us to feel that for Him. He wants us to crave Him in that spiritual way, the way that He thinks of this is my daughter. He wanted me to feel that through my daughter. So I definitely had her for a reason. She is also gifted as well. And then just same with my son too. It's just like everything just kind of just played out. And I look back on it, I'm like, wow, my life has come so far.
It has.
And even when I thought I couldn't provide for myself, I didn't have to worry about that because he always provided one step ahead of me. hmm
So amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
So
thank you
it's
for
kind of
sharing with
amazing.
everybody. This has been good.
hmm You're
So,
welcome.
all right, my dear. Well, I'm going to let you sign off. Thank you for joining with us. And
You're welcome.
yeah, what an amazing testimony. I love you so much, hon.
I love you too.
All right. And I will talk with you later. Bye, everybody.
Bye.